William Shakespeare and the Globe, written and illustrated by Aliki. Aside, though we read his works, quote his words, and see his plays performed throughout the world, William Shakespeare is a mystery. Little is known about him, not even the exact day he was born or what he looked like. What we do know comes from writings and drawings, from records of christenings, marriages, and deaths, from property deeds and wills. We search for clues in the history of the 16th and 17th centuries, in sites where he lived and died, and we find some in his own plays and poems. We have to guess the rest. Prologue. William Shakespeare. Sooner or later, everyone learns that name. It belongs to one of the greatest storytellers who ever lived. Comedy, tragedy, history, fairy tales, Shakespeare wrote about them all, in words that dance off the tongue. We learn about the Globe, too, the playhouse where Shakespeare's plays were performed by the greatest actors of his time. This is the story of William Shakespeare and the Globe, and the dream of a boy of our own time. But more about that later. Act 1, Scene 1. Will was born in Stratford-upon-Avon, England, more than 400 years ago. He lived with his big family crowded in a house on Henley Street. He went to the local grammar school where he studied Latin, Greek, and subjects he would write about one day. When he was 18, Will married Anne Hathaway, who was 8 years older. Anne joined the Shakespeare household too. Before long, their daughter Susanna was born. And then twins, Hamnet and Judith. Now, with a bulging house and a new family to support, young Will set off to find work in London. London. There it was, a noisy, overcrowded city built on the edge of a river, with only one way to walk across, London Bridge. Shoppers, traders, beggars, animals, and carts clattered along slippery cobblestone streets crammed with houses. Boats and ships swarmed along the smelly, polluted River Thames. Barges hauled cargo to and fro, and wherries rowed passengers across for a penny. It was faster and easier than walking across the bridge. Scene 2. Yet with the noise, smells, and sickness, there was music in the air, and actors performing everywhere. This was because Elizabeth I was queen. She cherished the arts. She loved music, dance, poetry, and plays. She encouraged the artists who created them, and even invited them to the palace to entertain her court. One day, Will would be one of them. In Elizabethan England, plays were popular afternoon entertainment among nobility and ordinary folk. Locals and visitors flocked to see their favorite company present a new play. Traveling actors toured around London and the countryside. They set up a stage and performed wherever they could, in city or village inns and inn yards, or in wealthy summer residences. Perhaps as a boy, Will saw them perform in Stratford when they toured there. Act 2, Scene 3. Traveling actors were not always respected and were often treated like vagabonds. One actor, James Burbage, decided that players needed a home of their own to gain more dignity. James leased land, assembled a company of actors, and built the very first public playhouse in England. It was called the Theatre, the name given to all playhouses after that. The Theatre was a huge success. By the time Will Shakespeare arrived in London, more playhouses had sprung up. Not everyone approved. Though the Queen and her Privy Council backed the players, the City Council and the Lord Mayor did not. He said playhouses lured lazy apprentices from work, and the noisy crowds attracted pickpockets and too much drinking, and helped spread the plague. The Puritans, a religious group, didn't like them either. So playhouses had to be built in liberties outside the city walls. Yet the play was the thing, and Will arrived in good time. Act 3, Scene 1. No one knows when Will's interest in the theatre world began, or what he did when he first came to London. Because of that, these are called the lost years. He eventually joined the theatre as an actor and valued playwright. Its new company, the Lord Chamberlain's Men, was the best in London. Will wrote parts in his plays with these actors in mind. Audiences loved Will's plays. They squeezed into the theater with their food, drink, and rowdy chatter. Over the river at the Rose were the company's rivals, the Admiral's Men. They also had a brilliant playwright, Christopher Marlowe. He was just Will's age and a great talent. But when Marlowe was only 29, he was killed in a brawl. After that, there was no one to match Will's genius. He wrote one brilliant play after another, and his company flourished. Other companies performed Will's plays as well. Act 3, Scene 2. A deadly plague interrupted the theater's success. For 2 years, all playhouses were closed. People fell ill and thousands died. During this time, Will wrote 2 long poems and dedicated them to a dashing young nobleman, the Earl of Southampton. The Earl was so honored he became Will's patron. Some say he paid Will generously. By now, Will was earning enough for his family to live in comfort. Scene 3. For 21 years the theater prospered. Then unexpected trouble hit when the landowner, Giles Allen, refused to renew their lease. He had other plans for the land. James Burbage had recently died, and his sons, Richard and Cuthbert, became managers. For 2 years they pleaded with Allen while their homeless company struggled in a rented playhouse, The Curtain. Though Allen owned the land, they owned the theater, and they wanted their valuable timber. In desperation, the brothers decided to act. They leased land across the river near the Rose and waited until Christmas time when Allen was away. At night, they secretly began to dismantle the theater and floated it across the Thames, piece by piece. With the timber, they started to build a new playhouse, and because all the world's a stage, they would call it the Globe. By spring, they were discovered, but it was too late. Half the building was up. By mid-1599, the Globe opened to instant success. It was so popular it soon drove the Rose Company away to build another playhouse. Audiences packed into the House with a Thatched Roof, sometimes 3,000 at a time. For sixpence the well-off sat in the Lord's rooms to see, and especially to be seen. For threepence they sat on cushions in the gentlemen's rooms. For twopence they perched less comfortably on gallery benches. But most were groundlings who paid a penny to stand in the yard beneath the open roof. When it rained, they knew it. Scene 2. In the next 12 years, Will wrote his greatest plays. Some were sad years, and the dark, complex tragedies he wrote reflected his mood. Will's only son, Hamnet, died of illness at age 11. In 1603, the Queen died and was succeeded by a new king, James I. The success of Will's plays, and the Globe, of which he was a shareholder, made him a prosperous gentleman. He bought his family New Place, the second finest home in Stratford, and invested in other properties. He would soon move back to his family and the countryside for good. Scene 3. Then disaster struck the Globe. During a performance of Henry VIII, a spark from the stage cannon accidentally set fire to the thatched roof. In one blazing hour, the glorious Globe burned down to the ground. Miraculously, everyone escaped unhurt. It was a dark time for all. Yet within a year, a second Globe was built on the original foundations. It was even more glorious than the first, and its roof was tile instead of thatch. They weren't taking any chances. Scene 4. The London drama scene was changing, supported by the new king. He enjoyed plays and entertainments even more than the Queen had. He admired Will's players and became their patron, and they were called the King's Men, and often performed at court. At the Globe, Ben Jonson was delighting audiences with his plays, and at court with his elaborate masks. Musical dance dramas. Inigo Jones was designing a new kind of indoor playhouse and creating lavish sets and costumes for the masks. Scene 5. Will kept in touch with friends and events in London, but it was time to rest. In the quiet of Stratford, surrounded by the garden of flowers he had woven into his writing, he wrote his last plays. A few years later, Will died on his 52nd birthday. He was buried in Holy Trinity Church. As his friend Ben Jonson said, "He was not of an age, but for all time." 7 years after William Shakespeare died, actor friends John Hemmings and Henry Condell collected 36 of his plays and published them as the First Folio. But for that book, Will's work would be lost to us today. 20 years later, all playhouses were closed by the Puritans. Eventually, they were pulled down, and new buildings covered all traces of the globe. Hundreds of years passed. Then along came Sam Wanamaker. Act 5, Scene 1. From the time Sam Wanamaker was a boy in America, he longed to visit the globe. In 1949, when, as a young actor, he set off to live and work in London, he thought his wish would come true. But when Sam finally found the site, all he saw was a forgotten plaque on a wall. He was shocked there was no greater tribute to Shakespeare and his famous playhouse. Sam became committed to an idea that became his dream. He would find a way to rebuild the globe as close to the original as possible, where Shakespeare's plays would be performed as they once were. Sam worked, talked, hoped, and pleaded until others joined him. One of the first was Theo Crosby, who became the devoted architect of the globe. Many others followed, fired by Sam's enthusiasm. Experts studied drawings, letters, documents, and buildings from Shakespeare's time, and found clues in his plays. Sam and his supporters guessed where the globe might have been, and would acquire land as close to it as possible. They raised money bit by bit, and then had to raise some more. Then, by chance, builders digging at a nearby site found the surprise of their lives. There, buried near their own site, were the foundations of the original Rose Playhouse. Later, they even found part of the globe. Now they could determine its size, its shape, and how it was built. These were the plans they followed. Act 5, Scene 3. At last, work began. They dug the foundation, chose the trees, cut the timber, fired the bricks, joined the frame, slotted the tenons, assembled the bays, attached the lathes, plastered the walls, cleaved the wood, turned the balusters, collected the reeds, thatched the roof, erected the galleries, fitted the benches, built the stage. Lifted the posts, hoisted the beam, covered the yard, raised the heavens. And added to the thatched roof what Will's globe never had, a sprinkler system. Last came the artists with their paints and gilt to transform the stage into the glory of an Elizabethan playhouse. And for the entrance, 116 artists from around the world wove magic into the iron gates. Each animal, insect, or flower they created represents a quotation from Shakespeare's plays. The new globe was finally ready to open its doors. Scene 4. After nearly 30 years of dedication, disappointments, high hopes, and the devotion of many supporters, Sam's globe finally opened. Fanfare, fireworks, and a festival of celebrations, attended by Queen Elizabeth II, burst forth in a fortnight of nightly revels. There was sadness, too, for Sam did not live to see it. Yet, Sam is there. He lives on in the Globe Playhouse. He dreamed for us, just as Will lives on in his immortal plays. The Globe Company of Actors and Musicians presented Shakespeare's Henry V at the opening, June 12, 1997. Sam's wife and Theo Crosby were also missed that night, for they did not live to see it. Not the end. the beginning.